I've got a Dogman story to share with you folks tonight. This story was shared to me probably a little over a year ago by a Border Patrol agent, and he wanted to remain anonymous, obviously. Uh, he had shared this story a while back, and he was a little apprehensive about me releasing it, but he eventually consented to it a couple months back, and I'm just now getting around to actually making a video about it. And it was quite surprising, some of the stories he told me about working on the southern border, some of the strange things he saw. He did have a number of things that he would call Bigfoot type encounters. But the first thing he came across was a Dogman encounter when he was still starting off, when he was still training. And it really shook him because he had never seen anything like it before. So he was driving around with, I guess, kind of a senior guy, his field training officer, his FTO, or whatever the Border Patrol calls him. And they were in their Ford truck. They were driving around. They were showing him the checkpoints. They were showing him the different parts of the border. They were going through the desert. They were showing him hot spots and known areas where, I guess, immigrants and drug dealers and all the people that come across the border, good and bad. And it was at night. I believe he said he was working 10. It was either 10 or 12-hour shifts where he started off and it was light out, and then it went into the early morning hours where it was light out again. And I guess it was a lot of desert running. I guess it was just a lot of, this was right around the Arizona-California border, right along in Mexico down there. And I guess it was just a lot of hot days and cool nights and running around out there and flat tires and catching people. And one night, while he was still fairly new, I guess his FTO actually had a cold and wasn't feeling very well, so he got to drive. And I guess normally the guy who was training him drove the truck around and showed him where to go and the ropes and radios and how to call people in and how to detain people and all that kind of stuff. So I guess it was kind of a quieter night, and he was driving around, and they're going down different roads and they're checking out different spots and different places where they found people in the past. And they're driving along. It seemed like any other night. When they were going through this desert, there was this dirt road that broke off of a paved road, and they were going down there a ways. And I guess it had been a hot spot. It was right near the border, a couple of spots from the borders, and there was kind of this gully where they had found people before. It was almost kind of a waypoint or a stopover, I guess, for immigrants or people smuggling drugs to stop on the other side of the border and re-outfit or get picked up. So they were going in kind of this little dirt road to where this turnaround was. And when they got to the turnaround, they hadn't seen anybody. They didn't see any people. They didn't see any signs of people, which they thought was a little odd. Because he says he always sees, trash or water bottles or, shoes or clothes or something out there, signs of people. And they didn't really see anything new. But when they got to the turnaround, they flipped on their lights on the truck and their spotlights, and they didn't really see anything. And as they're turning around, the headlights and the spotlights on the truck illuminated something. It was kind of off in the distance, and they're flipping around, and I guess he said, "What was that?" And his training officer looked over and said, "Oh, that? Oh, it's probably just a wild animal or something." And he's like, should we go take a look? Maybe it's a fur coat. Maybe it's a person. And he's like, why would anybody be wearing a fur coat? And he thought, well, good point. So, it was, 40, 50 yards away. It was kind of far away. They couldn't really tell what was going on. So they said, well, let's get closer. And I guess at this point, the terrain got kind of rough. So they slowly were creeping forward because they could see this thing kind of moving around. This kind of darkish, black furry object. And then they're like, well, is it a bear? And they're like, well, there aren't really bears out here. Is it a coyote? And they're like, well, I don't know if it's really a coyote. And about this point, the training officer, I guess his eyes got big. He sat up in his seat and he said, well, we should just leave it alone. And he was really urging the guy to get out of there. And he says, no, we need to go. We need to get out of here. It's just an animal. We got other things to do. Like it, all of a sudden, it clicked with the officer, the training guy, that something was going on, but he still had his curiosity. From him, it looked like a bear hunched over, like eating something. And I guess when they got closer, they got within 30 yards of it, a good distance, but still close enough that they could see it was going on. And at this point, they flipped on another set of bright lights, the stuff on the light bar as opposed to the headlights, lit this thing up. And as this thing lit up, it stood up. And from what he thought it was a man, like a giant man with like a fur coat on. And then as it turned around, he noticed it had this dog's head. It looked like a German Shepherd or like a wolf's head, but it was all black. And you could see the eyes, you could see the eye shine reflecting off his eyes. It was kind of this amberish tint. And it was very muscular. It had shoulders, and it kind of just pivoted on its hocks and had kind of had its paws in front of it, kind of like how a dog sitting down. But it was way too huge to be a dog. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 times the size of a dog. And at that point, it stood up on its back legs. And he said, whoa, they got no dogs. And at that point, they stopped. They stopped getting closer. And just for, he says it felt like forever, but it was probably only a couple seconds. This dog man, for lack of a better term, was just staring right at him. Like, what are you going to do? And at this point, they both just froze. They were frozen in the truck. His foot was on the brake, and this dog man was staring at him. And then eventually, the dog man took a step towards them and then took another step, and it was closing distance. I mean, it wasn't walking very fast, but its strides were so huge, and it was getting closer and closer, and they had the windows half rolled down. And just out of instinct, he says he threw it into reverse. He says at first he reversed and threw it into park and revved the engine. And as he revved the engine, the dog man opened its mouth a little bit at it and kind of hunched over and was kind of almost serpentining, zigzagging its way, kind of sizing up the truck. And at this point, they're pretty much like shitting their pants. And so he puts the truck into reverse finally, backs out a ways, backs up, closes it, and then kind of does a J-turn. And right as he does the J-turn, he looks in the rearview mirror, and he could see its teeth and its eyes in the rearview mirror, and he said it had to have been within a couple feet off the back of the truck because he could see the red lights and the tail lights lighting it up. And he heard a thump on the back of the tailgate. And he said he pretty much floored it, and he was going over jumps and dives and crashing over bushes and all kinds of stuff, kicking up gravel, getting onto this road. And he was looking in the mirrors, and he couldn't see it anymore. But he said he had never seen anything like that. It scared the crap out of him. They went back to the station. His training officer said, "What was that?" And he says, "It was a big dog. It was a big dog, but don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Whatever you do, don't talk about it." So, and he was asking, so what do we do? And he says, don't put anything in the report. Just say that the area was clear. Don't put anything into the report. Never talk about this again. Almost kind of like his training officer knew about what was going on. And then that's when he stopped for a minute. They were shaking, and the training officer told him, he says, look, we're not going to talk about this ever again. Just to understand, you're going to see things out in this desert. I don't understand. I don't know what they are. I don't go looking for it. Occasionally you'll pick up migrants that will talk about the Lobos or the big hairy man or strange stuff or ghosts in the desert or devils in the desert. Just tell them there's no such thing and just shrug it off. But just understand that there are things out here. Don't talk about it if you value your career. We've seen people try to report stuff like this, like UFOs and other things, and to just ignore it and pretend it didn't happen if you want to go anywhere in this job. And so I guess they went back to the station. They got some coffee, and he was gonna walk into the shift supervisor's office and say something, but right as he had the coffee in his hand, the big boss came by and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he was about to say something, and he could see his training officer in the back behind him shaking his head no. And he said, "Oh, nothing. That's fine. I think I'm just catching," his training officer's name's cold that he had. And he said, "Okay, well, get some tea and take care of yourself and get back out there." And it says he saw some other things after that. He saw strange lights in the sky. He saw something that he thought looked like a Bigfoot months later run across the road. And it's really interesting because a lot of his stories are very similar to, if you guys are familiar with Rocky Elmore, he was a Border Patrol agent who had a lot of similar stories near the border. And just non-paranormal stuff. The guy had a lot of crazy stories, and I thank him for his service. So yeah, I mean that would be very frightening to me. You're trying to do your job. It's just another night, and you come across this thing that looks like a bear and it stands upright. He says it was almost like it was eating something or going through something. Now he says he didn't see like a body or anything like that, but he said that it definitely looked like it was eating something, like it was hunched over or trying to go through something. And he couldn't tell what it was. It wasn't very big, whatever it was trying to eat or go through. Maybe it was a backpack, maybe it was some dropped food or something, or maybe it had caught some other animal and was eating itself. Um, but yeah, that definitely stuck with him. And he says he lost some sleep. And when he would be out in the desert doing patrols and looking at things, he would always be looking more around, and definitely heightened his awareness. So if you like this story, please give it a thumbs up, and please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And stay safe in the woods and the desert, folks.